Hi, everyone. I am Miss Melissa. I just want to thank you all for joining us today in our brand new format of our virtual children's service. I also want to remind you that if you go onto our website for children's ministry, we have a lot of new fun and exciting activities that you can register for. We also have our new monthly take-home bags. So today our storyteller is going to be Miss Sue, and she's going to tell us a story from the Bible of Elijah and Elisha. So sit tight, and here's Miss Sue.
Well, hello everyone. It's Miss Sue, and I'm back to tell you another story in the life of Elijah. If you recall, the last time I talked to you about Elijah, he had done a powerful thing proving who God was, calling fire down on his altar, but he became very scared and ran when Queen Jezebel found out and threatened his life. At the end of that time, God asked him to do some things. So we're going to pick up the story today. Elijah has left the mountain where he was, where he heard God's still small voice, and he is heading back into Israel to find a new prophet. God knew that Elijah was old, Elijah was tired, and Elijah needed help. So he goes to find this new prophet. You are not going to believe what this new prophet's name is. His name is Elisha. Isn't that confusing? The old prophet is Elijah. Can you say that with me? Elijah. Great. The new prophet's name is Elisha. Elisha. Wonderful. Well, Elijah found Elisha plowing in his father's field. The ground must have been really, really hard because Elisha was plowing with 12 pair of oxen. An ox is like a bull or a steer, but it's bigger and it's stronger. And in the days of Elijah, it was cheaper and not as strong as a horse, not as fast as a horse or a mule, and so farmers could afford the oxen. So this was what Elijah was doing. Well, Elijah walks up to Elisha and does a very strange thing. He takes his mantle, and I don't really have a mantle, but I can imagine that it's a bit like this, only much, much bigger. They used it as an outer coat, and he takes his mantle and he places it around the shoulders of Elisha. That was kind of an odd thing to do. Don't you imagine Elisha was kind of hot from doing all of that plowing? But it had a special meaning. A mantle represented leadership, and Elijah was telling Elisha, you are going to be God's new prophet. And Elisha understood that. So do you know what Elisha did? He took the plow that he was plowing with, broke it up into smaller pieces of wood, built a fire, made an altar, and put some of the oxen on that altar as a sacrifice to God. He was dedicating himself to become the next prophet of God. When he completed that, he left the farm and went with Elijah in his travels. They were going to spend some time together so that he could learn everything he could from Elijah. Well, God had made a very special promise to Elijah. Elijah had done many powerful things. He had been true to God all through his life. And so God made a promise to Elijah that he made to no one else before and no one else since. He promised Elijah that when it was time for him to go to heaven, he would send down a chariot of fire and horses of fire and swoop him up to heaven. Can you imagine? We don't have chariots today, but they were used by the very wealthy and by soldiers back in Elijah's day. And God was representing his power when he sent down a chariot. But they didn't know when that day was going to be. So Elijah and Elisha became very good friends. And one day Elisha comes to Elijah and he says, God has sent me to Bethel, but you stay here. Well, Elisha kind of had a feeling about this. And he said, oh no, my father, I am going to go with you. So he traveled with him to Bethel. When he got to Bethel, there were a group of other prophets there, and they came up to Elisha, and they said, you do know that God is going to take Elijah up into heaven today. And Elisha says, I know, be quiet. Elisha was not ready to say goodbye to Elijah. So then Elijah says to Elisha, God has sent me to Jericho. You stay here. Again, Elisha says, no, my father, I am going to walk with you. And so they walked to Jericho. And again, in Jericho, there was another group of prophets. You guessed it. They come to Elisha and they say, you do know God is going to take Elijah up to heaven today. And Elisha goes, yes, I know. Be quiet. He still is not ready to say goodbye to Elijah. One more time, Elijah says to Elisha, God has sent me to the Jordan. You stay here. And Elisha says, oh no, my father, I am traveling with you. And so they walk to the Jordan. When they get to the Jordan, there are a group of prophets standing a distance away, but they say nothing. So Elijah takes his mantle and he rolls it up and he touches the waters of the Jordan with his mantle. Do you know what happened? The waters parted to the right and to the left, and Elijah and Elisha walked across that dry ground to the other side. When they got there, Elijah turns to Elisha and he says, I am going to be with God. Is there anything I can do for you? And Elisha says, oh yes, please, please, will you give me a double portion of your spirit? He had seen all of the things that Elijah could do, and he wanted to do the very same things. Elijah said, that is a very difficult thing you are asking, and I can't promise that. But I will tell you this. If you see me when I am taken up into heaven in the chariots and horses of fire, then your wish will be granted. If not, if you don't see me, then it won't happen. As they were walking and as they were talking, suddenly a whirlwind, kind of like a tornado here, came up, and the chariot of fire and the horses of fire came down, and it separated Elisha from Elijah, and Elijah was taken up in that chariot. Well, Elisha shaded his eyes and he looks up and he watches as Elijah disappears into the heavens. He was so sad. He goes, my father, my father. Now, you know that Elijah was not really his father, but this was a term of respect and a term that Jewish people used for leaders that they wanted to follow. And so Jewish people have a custom, and when they're very sorrowful and very upset about things, they take their clothing and they rip them right in two. And it's representative of how broken their heart is. So this is what Elisha did. He takes his outer garment and he rips it. And as he is standing there with his head bowed, he is so upset. He notices that right down there on the ground was Elijah's mantle. God had heard his request, and God granted his request. So he takes the mantle. He knows God is with me. So he goes back to the Jordan River. He reaches down, he touches the water. You guessed it, the water's parted, and Elisha walks alone back across those waters. When he gets to the other side, there in the distance were those 50 prophets that had seen the whole thing happen. And he goes over and begins to talk with them. God knew that Elisha needed some comfort and he needed some company. You know, boys and girls, we live in a very difficult time right now. We don't always get to be with our friends. We don't always get to do all of the activities that we used to do. And sometimes we're very lonely. But God knows that. And we have phones and we have computers and we can text our friends and we can Instagram our friends and we can share pictures and we can even see each other when we talk. God still cares for you and he cares for me and he wants to be there for us. Thank you, boys and girls, for listening.